Thank you for being here. And just so you know, it's going to be a very informal, almost like a Twitch stream. There's going to be a bunch of stuff. We're actually doing an in-person meeting. People are in the hallway now. We're at the Microsoft offices north of Boston. And we're excited. We got a lot to talk about. I'm going to give people an update on the Microsoft AI tour last week. We're going to talk about MedPrompt, which is some really cool stuff Microsoft is doing with prompting and healthcare. We're going to talk about code, like always. We'll look at some code. And so that's more or less the plan. We have sushi coming at 6, so we're excited about that. Sorry to tease you. I know we can't have sushi through the stream. But it is what it is. And so, yeah, so with that, I think people are going to start coming in the room in just a minute. So I'm just going to continue to, I'm just going to set up a little bit before I start sharing my screen. Yeah, please feel free to entertain me with comments and chats and all that good stuff. And again, I just want to make sure we're set up here. Go here, preview. And then you just need to make sure we can connect to our VM. Really excited about my new developer machine. We're running, obviously it's VM up in Azure, but you would actually, my developer machine is really pretty sick. I think it has 64 cores, like 256 megabytes of memory or something. Let me just see. I can start sharing the screen now. Let me do that. I don't actually care if you see some of my stuff. I'm not doing anything top secret. And so let me just go ahead and share screen. And I'm okay doing the entire screen. And share, and then we'll minimize this. And then, yeah, hopefully, if there's a problem with this stream, I hate when just let me know. Let me know in the chat, if you will. Let me move this out of the way. Special effects. All right, so it looks like we got our VM is up and running. Got all sorts of cool stuff. We got ChatGPT up here. We got all sorts of interesting stuff. Get Kraken is open. I'll show you one thing though, just while we're waiting. I'll just start talking and showing you some cool stuff while we're waiting for people to come in the room. One of the things we're excited about that we've been working on is
this the community?
Yeah, from Microsoft healthcare. Yeah. There's people are just sort of chilling outside right now. I mean, feel free to hang out here.
Okay.
And we have sushi coming at 6. And yeah, just make yourself at home.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, you're in the right place. And so we have a stream too. So if you hear me talking, I'm not. Well, I might be a little bit crazy, but that's not what I'm talking.
Yeah, no worries.
So I was
I've been here before, so yeah, I know.
Oh, you have? Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was just explaining to people. Well, you know what? Before I should explain it, I should put it up on the screen so that we can all look at it. I thought it was. I don't know what's going on with this projector. Oh, that looks promising. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, so I was just like, I'm just starting to show random stuff. Honestly, I just opened up my VM and I just opened up like the first thing in front of me. And I was like, well, we're working on so much cool stuff. It shouldn't be hard to find something to show people. And so this is just like what's open right now. And actually, we haven't worked on this a lot this week. This was really more like stuff that we were diving in 2 weeks ago. And so essentially, it's just different. What we're doing is testing different techniques for RAG. And so here, what's interesting, so we got this code from a repo from Microsoft. And what I really liked about this and what we were kicking the tires on is for the it's a different type of RAG, but it's interesting. And what it does is it actually builds a SQL query. So, you know, a lot of the RAG stuff, you'll get input from the prompt, and then you'll, you know, go get some data, and then you'll send that back to the prompt, and blah, blah, blah. Well, this is just a little bit different in that you're taking the question, and then you're trying to formulate SQL based on the question that was asked. You know,
generating the SQL code
Yeah.
on the prompt.
Yeah. And actually, what's interesting about this is, in a way, it has to do with probably one of the more advanced topics we'll talk about tonight, and which I would submit is probably some of the most advanced stuff Microsoft's doing, at least publicly, you know, with OpenAI, and that is MedPrompt. So MedPrompt is a framework that allows you to do RAG type stuff and much more, you know, define prompts so that they work. Like, I think their benchmark was they hit 90% or something better. They did better than MedPalm, and they did better than, I forget what's the other, I want to say John Snow Labs, but I don't know if that's true. Like, whoever, maybe it was Anthropic, which I think John Snow Labs uses Anthropic, but so, but anyway, what I liked about this code, so we got this repo from Microsoft, and by the way, I think it's like a lab in a day type thing, or it's called like chat with your data. And then there was another repo too that the engineer that was doing the presentation had. I got this a couple months ago, and I became interested in it because I was really intrigued with this idea of, you know, using the LLM to actually generate the SQL query. And so this is the one for Microsoft, where basically what they're doing is they're using Cosmos here, and they've got a database that's set up with hotels. And then, like, this is the key part here, though, right? So this is what intrigued me, is that they start to structure the query prompt, right? But look at how specific they're being. So it's telling it, not, you know, it's a Cosmos DB SQL query that we need, and the container has data about the hotels, and then it even gives it the JSON schema for the hotels. And so the idea is that we should be able to ask it, you know, a human form type question, and that's the code down here, right? So there's the functions that get called. See, this one they didn't have this one implemented yet, but it looks like they were going to sort of add a little agent stuff to it too, where like it would go the next step and it would book a hotel if you wanted to. And then finally, like, this is where the bulk of the work is done, right? So this is where you're going to actually connect to your, you know, your endpoint, and it calls the functions and it does the work. And so I thought, okay, that's cool, but first I need it to work in SQL. You know, because the data that we wanted to test it against is a SQL database. We put it up into Azure SQL, just one table, you know, to do some testing with. And then I also wanted to get this into Visual Studio I saw my app settings there, so I feel like I might want to close that just in case. I don't know what's on that screen. Yeah.
So Microsoft provided this. Did they?
Yeah.
This is in Python. Did they also provide it in other languages like C#?
No, and the reason being is because, like, for a lot of this stuff, like, you really have to use Python to do it, because it falls under the category of data science, you know. And you make a really good point, because that's one of the things that we've been like, from an architecture perspective, when you're engineering the solution, you have to actually, I'll cover that you have to, that's something that we have to consider. Sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. Where were we going with that?
We were going, well, C# first.
Oh, C#, yeah. So you're right. So here, for real life, let's just talk about it. I'll keep going with the demo. So what we did next is we got this thing in the Visual Studio, right? I'm sorry, VS Code, but it's still Python code. Yeah. So when I'm running it here, it's actually running in a Python environment, right? And so we do that by specifying the environment up here, blah, 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 just standard Python stuff. But to your point, the question is, so, okay, great. So if you get it working here, then how are you going to deploy it, right? And so I've been researching that the past 30 days, and we've been looking at two different options. Like, so there's Flask. There's this framework or library, you know, that basically essentially a Flask that would allow you to do HTTP requests to, you know, Python code. But we're using the semantic kernel, if you remember right, from Microsoft, which the web API that that they give you some stumping, and it's in C sharp.
Mhm.
And we actually really like that. So now what we're exploring is, okay, there's three options right now. Should we find a way to get it to run in C sharp? I don't really like that idea. I like the idea of being able to constantly push Python code somewhere where we can get it from an endpoint, right? And so then the next thing would be, okay, well, do you want to do it with, then if you were doing it in the Microsoft world, Microsoft would say do Azure Functions, right?
Yeah.
The problem with Azure Functions is I like my code to run really fast, and Azure Functions is, I mean, love them. They're durable. They do a great job, and maybe people, can make them work faster than me, but we still might end up there. But then the other thing is you could do Flask, like we said. And then finally, there's hosting. So what's happening right now is there's a bunch of third-party hosting companies that are springing up, and they just specialize in exactly this, where they basically take your Python code and expose it as an endpoint for you. So I don't know if we would go like full on in production with that route, but I think for right now, because we're just trying to, we literally need to get our product demo video for Microsoft startups done in the next 30, 60 days. So we're on a really tight timeline. So I think what we're going to end up doing is any Python code we have, we'll publish to a third party and then skip Azure Functions just for right now, and then revisit it later. So
just my basic sense, I don't consider Python an acceptable language for production level code.
Well, yeah, but that's a conversation for another meeting, Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be I would love to have that conversation, but it's just not right now. It would take up the whole meeting. It would take up the whole meeting. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so we ported that more or less what you were looking at in that Jupyter notebook, and I'm pretty sure I can actually get it to run. Again, I was just telling these guys before you walked in, I turned on the stream, and then I literally just opened up my VM and just started talking about the first thing the window that I popped open. So that's what we're doing right now. And I knew it would be fun and whatever it was, or interesting, because literally it seems like everything we're doing is just really fascinating right now, at least from my perspective. And so we went through the Jupyter Notebook. That was the Microsoft implementation of this. I explained I wanted to make it work for SQL, right? So this is what I ended up with. So I got this over into VS Code. And what's going on with this window here? Why is it blocking this? This is like the most important part I wanted to show you. Well, here's my template. What is this thing? It's so weird. Oh, is it the code block window thing? So go away. Huh. Well, you can sort of see, right, what I'm doing back here. Let me see. That's not acceptable. Does anybody have any idea what this is? I mean,
can you turn it to a markdown code? So click the three dots and then
here.
Yeah.
And then
markdown.
I don't see markdown.
It would be in the bottom left then.
The what?
Bottom left of the cell of that cell itself.
Oh, here.
He meant
Oh, here you go. Okay.
Yeah, and then maybe you could just.
Oh, that's add. I'm sorry, I'm just adding blocks.
Yes, so maybe you could just Control A in that cell and copy paste it into a markdown cell if that works.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I mean, if anything, I could just put it in Notepad too, but it's like, why is that? But you're right. I mean, I was just going to do this actually. So, of course, the font's going to be huge. This will be worth it. Trust me. Okay. So here's what I came up with. So you can see I'm setting the query prompt equals 2. And then instead of, before where I was feeding it a JSON schema with the Cosmos DB, what this is I'm telling it specifically, create a SQL Server T-SQL query. Like I'm even getting very specific, like make sure it's T-SQL. So it doesn't hiccup on the SQL syntax or functionality available across each one. And then I get very specific. The query should retrieve the following. And then I give it first a SQL Server query template. And so I'm even telling it the name, right? So I'm like, this is basically our repo, this is where all the data is. And then I'm identifying the fields. Oh, by the way, what's really cool about this is actually coming from PeopleSoft, because technically what we do is every like 3 times a day, we run a job that takes from a PeopleSoft view and puts it into our SQL Server table. And so for anybody that works with PeopleSoft, you probably recognize like some of the formatting of some of these cases is pretty standard for their ERP stuff. So what's really cool is technically this is in SQL, but we've pulled it through our engine into SQL from PeopleSoft. So then we give it the column names, and then we're also specifying the unique. Oh, awesome. Okay, he could just drop it off, and I'll be right out there. It's all paid for and everything. So, you give it the primary key as well, and then I had to. What I found is it was tripping up on the date, like it couldn't understand which column was date, etc. So I had to get more specific, and I'm like, date details. So if you need to filter on a date, use the column cycles this, name details, and then I give it some aggregating and grouping information, and then I tell it always group by name with departments and cycle, because I know that'll basically lump it together by provider. And then important notes, you can only use this table and the columns defined in the SQL Server template. And then I'm a little bit in debug mode. That's why I threw that last piece at the end, because when, as I was start troubleshooting this, it was like returning a query, but it wasn't quite right. So I found I had to tweak it. And then let's see if we can actually, if it will still run.
Can I ask
So,
you a question?
of course.
So once you have this running, if you submitted it 5 times,
yeah,
did you get the same stuff back? The same query?
No,
back?
I didn't. And but in all fairness, I don't think I've really nailed the prompt template. I've put about an hour or so into it, and now I'm switching directions, which is, I still like this path, but especially because we're focused on healthcare, there's this new paper and repo called MedPrompt, which I would strongly encourage everybody to look at here. And it's probably the most cutting edge stuff that's publicly available from Microsoft on doing, and what they're trying to do is do clinical stuff against an LLM. And I don't want to dive into it too much because I haven't done a ton of research, but on the surface, it looks like it's essentially what they're doing here. It's behind the scenes, you're using sophisticated prompt templates. And I'm sure it's again, I don't want to speak too much without researching it, but I'm sure it's a combination of some other stuff they're doing in the background. But the end result is that they just published recently is it's either 90 or 95% is their benchmark that they're hitting on the standard tests that they're testing these clinical LLMs against. So it actually according to them, just using a standard large language model, but using this framework for putting together the prompts, they were able to do better than Google MedPalm 2. And I think the third one was Anthropic. But again, it's all public. Go read it for yourself, So my approach now, so 2 things I decided after seeing this is, yes, I like it, but we're going to do it, but we need to get a lot more sophisticated. And the best way to do that is to follow the peer-reviewed stuff around MedPrompt that people are working on. And the second thing is, and that's, by the way, just to be clear, that approach is better. Like what we're trying to do is best here for structured data. So there's, we also have to acknowledge that one of the other use cases. So right now, this is sitting on top of finance data. I should say finance data. It's activity data around how providers spend their time. That's what's in that table that we're generating the query about. So it's more on the operations side of healthcare. So first of all, what I love about that, the reason why we went down this path 9 months ago is we knew we wouldn't have to go into the debate about safety. Well, I mean, obviously we have to be safe, even though it's operations data. But you know where I'm going, right? It's a lot easier to be safe with PeopleSoft data than it is electronic health record, is what I'm trying to say. So for other types of data, let's say on the operations side, you want to start talking to contracts. That's one use case we're looking at next in finance, right? So, and when I say looking at doing, so we have a Copilot ourselves. It's called the Real Activity Physician Experience Copilot that sits on top of this stuff, right? So, what we're doing for unstructured data is Microsoft actually kills it in that space. So they have Azure AI Search, and which is basically they renamed Azure Search, and they've, and obviously like everybody else, they're improving and enhancing all the vector search and the capabilities for embeddings and whatnot. And so that's really, they've nailed it. Like that seems to work really well for unstructured content, and quite frankly, probably for structured. We just haven't tested it a bit yet because we wanted to test stuff. We're building products, so we want to test stuff that we can say, right, that we don't have to tell customers they have to go buy Azure AI Search or something, right? It doesn't mean we won't end up landing there, but of course we want to start first, in my opinion, as an engineer, like what can we do, for the lowest entry point, right? So, but that said, where we are right now is we just need to show people that you can do stuff with this stuff, right? That legitimately the stuff we're talking about, you can do. And so the fastest way to do that is with Azure AI Search. And so if you go and you go up into Azure AI Studio, so you just go OAI. Actually, I'll just show you real quick because we got the VM open. So if we go to, let's go here. If you go to oai.azure.com, it'll bring you here. And if I actually go to the home page, you can see they've got this, it's huge button right on the home page, bring your own data. And so here, what you can do is you can select blob storage. They have Azure Cosmos DB now. That's cool. And then URL or web address, and now upload files. That's cool. A couple months ago, there was only Azure AI Search and Azure Blob Storage. So they've already added 3 more options here. So, this is interesting, right? And you can bypass Azure AI Storage. So I could see a scenario or a use case where you're dumping a bunch of content into blob storage and then, using it, the LLM to chat with that data, right? So again, I just want to make sure you understand, I'm not suggesting that you can't do structured data this way. Of course you can. And I'm sure the results are, probably really great, but because we're building product, we're just trying to find the way to do it with the least moving parts. But for right now, we're probably going to end up doing this for unstructured data. So it's a very long technical question to, where we are realistic, but hopefully you appreciate the research. We've been putting a ton of time into this, as you know. And so that's that.
Just a quick question: is blob storage the same as S3 buckets on AWS?
No, well, that's an interesting question. I'm quite certain that by blob storage, that's not what they mean in that use case. But it is worth noting that, I want to say Microsoft Fabric, but the reality is that it was open source stuff that so Microsoft Fabric is sort of, honestly, it's just really just a brand that they applied over a bunch of their data stuff. But I shouldn't say that. They did add something significant, but they didn't build it. It was open source from another group, and that's all the Delta change stuff, right? And specifically, most importantly, what to the point of your question is, what you can do is you can actually specify Parquet files that are in another cloud. They don't even have to be in Azure. Like you can just say, okay, I have, these Parquet files in this S3 bucket, right? And then I'm going to use air quotes Fabric because I'm still adjusting to the new language. But then in Fabric, you would basically build your pipeline, right? And you would say, okay, I've got these Parquet files in S3, and then so I think I would deal with it at that level. And then once you have the data, then, it opens up doors on the Azure side, right? Yeah. But I'm quite sure like the out of the box one, they mean, that's going to be, so I'm just curious, really, honestly, just for grins, I'm wondering if this will still run. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to run, let's just see. I'll start at the top. So let's run this. Okay. That runs fine. Okay. Let's set our query prompt. That should have ran fine. And then, so here's a bunch of code. So this is where it's going to go hit up against the SQL, execute the query, and then functions. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. And so that's PyODBC. That's right, just to connect to the database. And then, okay, here's our functions. So we see how I changed the function to query PeopleSoft as well. And I changed it down here. And then here's where all the work really gets done. So it's either going to do or die here. Yeah, looks like it worked. And then, okay, so now we can start testing it down here. So if all that code ran correctly, then now I should be able to, this line's commented out. So what it'll do is it's going to run this agent line, right? Show me all activity. That's the question. And then, as a matter of fact, you can see it down here the last time I ran it. Just real quick, in case it doesn't work, I'll show you the one that did work. So you can see the last time I ran it. But you see, it's not accurate because the table name is wrong. And I even specified the table name. If you remember correctly, I said table name is FTE, blah, blah, blah. I forget what the name of our exact name of our table. But it returned activities. And so let's just go. Let's see what happens. Yeah, see, it pulled activities again. And this doesn't make any sense either. But candidly, I was like troubleshooting this and debugging, so I don't know where I left off. I was just curious if the code would even run, you know. But it gives you, I think it gives you a really good taste for what you would actually be doing if you chose this method, right? Where you want to generate the, in this case, I'm generating a statement based on the prompt template. But now, of course, something else I want to show you, though, is that we can do that, but instead of generating a SQL query, I guess we would essentially, you know, create a return response to a clinical question. And that's what med prompt is.
So basically, you're sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Basically, creating queries, prompts, and then prompting the LLM to give you SQL queries.
Yeah. Well, if we were to go forward with this, though, this would just be the first step in the workflow or the orchestration, if you would, because then once we had that query, then of course the next step would be to actually take that query and issue it against execute it against the SQL server. We're not doing that here. Like, we are literally just generating the query at this point. By the way, the code is there to go talk to the SQL server, but by design, I'm not doing that right now. Like, I just want to see the thing generate the correct query, you know? So the next step would be that you would send the query to the database, and this is standard RAG stuff. And then the database, the SQL server is going to return a data set. And that data set, you want to take that and give it back to the language model again with another prompt thing. And basically what you're going to tell it is take this data set and turn it into something friendly, conversational for the user, right? So you're going to do multiple trips to the language model, one on the way out to like format your, and by the way, it's a very standard pattern, whether you're doing it this way or you're doing it getting content out of Azure AI search, you know? Yeah.
They use the term RAG.
Oh, sorry. Retrieval augmented generation. Yeah, it's essentially what it means is chatting with your data. It's just a fancy way. That's one thing that drives me crazy about this AI stuff. I really feel like they you know, it's typical in our industry. We like to use big words and acronyms to keep people out, right? Like, we got to make it sound so complicated. You know what I mean? Yeah, in all fairness, you're right. We do it in all industry. But yeah, no, RAG. It's so, but basically all you're saying is that you're going out and you're getting some database and you're feeding it into the LLM, right? And you're just doing that in a meaningful way. And it's really is just that pattern that I just described to you. Like, the most common one right now is the user enter. And by the way, what's also interesting to note from a software engineering perspective, it doesn't have to be the user that enters the prompt, right? Like, the first wave of this stuff that we've seen and what everybody knows is ChatGPT and these chat clients. But I would submit to you that that's just because it's a human that's supplying the prompt. And the only way that a human can supply the prompt is they need a chat window that they can type on the thing, right? But there's no, like, where we're going with this is our prompts can come from orchestrations, right? So for example, if I see that my PeopleSoft numbers are hitting a point that's uncomfortable in finance, that's a great trigger to create a prompt. And a human wouldn't even be involved in that, right? And then you see where I'm going with that, right? That could be extremely, extremely powerful from a software architecture point of view, I would submit. So it's also worth noting that a prompt doesn't necessarily need to come from the human. But that, so again, it's not terribly complicated. There's like a prompt that's going in, whether it's from a human or something else. and then we're going to send that to the large language. Well, it depends. If you're doing the Azure AI search thing, you would take that first and you would use it to go get the stuff from Azure AI search, and then that's going to come back, and then you're going to, you know, format it in such a way so it makes sense.
So I have a question on this. If I look at the type of pipeline of steps you're talking about,
Yeah.
it seems to me there's an awful lot of places for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
So this first query looks like failed to generate. It looks like the query actually
Yeah.
failed because
It's awful code. I wouldn't put it anywhere near production. I'll have to go further. Yeah. 100%. We're just kicking the tires in a notebook.
Wrong
Yeah.
table, but you know, how can you get it to the point where you're not worried that a failure like this can get, for instance, it happens to pick the wrong table. If it picks the wrong table, it still has fields
Yeah.
of the right name in it, then the query would execute. You would basically be getting data back, which
Yeah.
is the wrong data. You feed it into the chat model, which will then be formatted and it comes out to the doctor, whoever's looking at it. Everything looks nice, but the data itself is garbage.
Yeah.
So how do you stop that? How do you get to the point where that's not an issue?
Yeah, I actually think that's sort of a good segue into, so you're right. So I saw this and you know, and I really didn't go any further because I was like, well, this might be great. Don't get me wrong. It might be great, but something is, you know, I need a fast path, you know, to do this RAG stuff. Right. And so, but it's engineering. Like I had to kick the tires on it. So I know. Right. And then what I decided after seeing this was that, okay, I think it's going to be better off, especially because we're in healthcare, to look at this concept that this med prompt stuff, which I'll start to show you right now. And also on the unstructured data side again, and maybe we'll even end up there for the database stuff, you know, the Azure AI search, right? Again, I just don't want to start there because that's a cost that we have to pass on to all of our clients if we start there. So, and you know, the nice thing about Microsoft is they let us be very candid as long as we're just talking about cool tech, and you know, they're very open as well, right? Like they want us to build product. They want us, if we need to be a little agnostic. I mean, at the end of the day, we're running models on Azure, right? That's really what the important thing from their perspective is, right? So, so this is just, I want to be clear that you guys are actually, I think you're getting a treat, because if you go to any other Microsoft thing, they wouldn't be showing you this at all. The first thing they're going to do is show up, but here's Microsoft 365 Copilot, and this is what you can do with PowerPoint, and blah, 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 you know, and here's what we're going to do with Windows. And oh, by the way, we've got a security one, you know, and here's the sales Copilot that's coming next, right? And they're all racing to market and they got their KPIs and stuff. But what a lot of people missed over the last year, because they freaked everybody out, not Microsoft, everybody else, and Microsoft, the whole industry, they put the fear of God into people about AI. And they were like, no, you have to stop. Like, wait, we need to make sure it's not going to kill all the humans on the planet first. Like, are you kidding me? I'm a computer scientist. So anyway, you know the story because you've been coming to the meetings this year, right? So we're like, no, we're moving forward, but we're going to focus on the operation side. So now I think what's happening is now the other vendors are seeing what we saw 12 months ago, right? Because I saw technically, I guess they're a competitor, but they're a bunch of great friends. It's a great company. I forgot I'm streaming. I want to be careful about this. I won't mention the company name, but anyway, they are world-class, have great dev team, great governance tool. And they started publishing this stuff around, hey, here's our governance for AI or Copilot or something, right? And I looked at it, and it was basically a couple of dashboards, and like, I shouldn't say that. It was like a traditional app, like what you would expect. But my thing was, you should eat your own dog food. Like if you're going to do a governance Copilot, if you're going to do governance for Copilot, it should be a Copilot. It should be a natural language thing that you're interacting with. And so actually, interesting enough, that's the path we went. We actually did build a governance thing, and it's called Wheelhouse, and that's the path we took. So our governance, you actually do through our custom Copilot. And so my point is that surprised me. I was surprised that they weren't further along and didn't have their own Copilot infrastructure, and then they would just add the dashboards to that, right? So, but again, this is all, Paul Swider's opinions and Paul Swider's world. So what I would like to jump into next, though, is, first, by the way, the repo is really cool, too. This is, well, let me start here. Sorry, I don't mean to jump around. I just lost my window. give me just 1 second. This is what I was looking for the chat. So just to refresh your memory, this is one of the clients, the demo one that we've been doing. We've actually furthered this a lot longer now, and it has different branding and stuff, but this is still the one we use for demo purposes. And so remember this, just to refresh your memory, this is the sample app that comes with semantic kernel. So this is a Node.js user experience, and it's talking to a C# web API, and the C# web API is going back to our Azure OpenAI, and that really is running. Like, this is live, there's no smoke and mirrors here, running in a demo environment. But and oh yeah, you can see I spoke and I must have killed it. I gotta make sure it's running. Anyway, what I was really trying to get at though is there's another repo, an Azure chat client, and that's this one window that I had open, and that's what you're looking at. And so here's another flavor of that, and see the difference. It's just laid out a little bit different, obviously got a different color and all that, but it goes to my point that, remember, the prompt part of it, it could be through a chat app like this, right? Microsoft is starting to show us it could be a panel in PowerPoint. Actually, Word, when you open up Word, the demo I saw, they actually have the prompt right in the middle of the document. And instead of going file new or file template, you just type, which might not work for everybody. Like I still like to use the mouse in Word a little bit. Like, I don't know. I'm on the fence. I'm curious to see how that works out for people, But here, what I'm getting at is this is just another, it's another, what do they call it? Chat solution accelerator powered by OpenAI. So what we're going to look at though, let's look at MedPrompt. And again, I am not going to pretend to be an expert here on MedPrompt at all. We just started researching this, very fascinated by it. You can see the paper was published on November 28th. So it's literally just a couple months old. And this is the blog post, and here's the paper. And so you can see the paper is focused on, can these general purpose models outcompete special purpose tuning? And so you can, dive into the paper here. I just want to sort of give you an overview of what's out there for right now. And then this article dives in a little bit deeper. And this is pretty cool. It talks about the path from zero shot to random few shot to random few shot, blah, 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 to essentially what they're building with this. It's actually called prompt base, but the first thing they used prompt base for was MedPrompt. So you can use this prompt base if you wanted to. I'm sure there's actually companies doing it right now in a basement that they're using prompt base to do it for their own industries, I'm assuming, right? Or maybe even more niche than that. And then, so we'll keep going here. And then, so this is what I was reading that I pointed out. You can see the benchmark. So you can see it got up to GPT-4 with MedPrompt, got up to 90.2. And outperformed the models that were tuned, right? So the difference here is MedPrompt didn't have any fine tuning for clinical information. It only used this prompting technique. So I thought that was fascinating. They're getting to the heart of your question, right? How do you take this, get down to the next level where it can become more accurate, right? So this is the path that we're going down. And so the blog post is really helpful. You can actually see here too, they've already started out other industries, but I don't think it's because I'm sure people at Microsoft are, but I don't know that for sure. And then, so the repo, let's see if we can find the repo. So this is just a blog post. Let's see. Here it is, prompt based. That's why, because the repo and I guess I'm going to call it a framework for now. Collection of resources, best practices, and example scripts. So prompt base is where this comes from. But again, like the very first one that they did is MedPrompt. So now you can see the stuff from the blog post in the GitHub repo. So what we're in the process of doing right now is going through this repo and some other research. And just like Microsoft created templates to do accurate clinical stuff, we want to do that on the operations side of healthcare. Quite frankly, we already are. We're just trying to do it better, you know. And so this is something I wanted to share here today in the spirit of, like, I know some of you have been here to multiple meetings, so you know we always try to keep that like really on the technical side and share. So I thought you would enjoy seeing this. So do you want to take a quick break so I can go get the sushi and take a snack and we ask some questions and have some conversation and stuff?
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right. So if you're online, you get to hang out while we get sushi. I'll come back and try to entertain you. Awesome.
That's quite a bit.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. I have
But
like so
I
much.
still, you know, I fundamentally look at this. Too many ways stuff can go wrong right now.
Yeah, especially for like medical applications, right? That was something that I was talking to my friend about. It's like, let's say if a medical professional was using this and then providing with wrong information, the patient got hurt, then who's responsible, right?
Yeah, well, not only who's responsible,
Yeah.
but ultimately the physician's still responsible.
Oh yeah.
But even more important than hurting people is money.
All right, dude.
You know, the thing loses you $1 million
Yeah, for like malpractice and all that.
on that. So, but yeah, no, it's just. And it still comes down to the fundamental thing is that there's no understanding anywhere in these chains.
What do you mean by the understanding?
These small networks are doing some sort of statistical figures. They don't have what we call understanding.
I see.
In other words, you do some, let's say you give it to a person that comes back with a query, complicated query, and you look at the query, you look at that and say, something is wrong here.
Okay. So it
You know,
kind of,
something doesn't make sense here.
so it kind of doesn't have like an intuition that an experienced person would have.
You know, I mean, it's amazing to me these things come back,
Yeah.
you know, with stuff like that, you know, that's able to do it. So that,
Yeah.
you know, that's the kind of what we would call understanding. It's sort of, in some sense, sort of like a rope, okay, take these pieces and put them together in the following fashion. Not quite what it's doing. But,
When you say understand, are you kind of talking about like an intuition for how to?
well,
piece it?
intuition would, you know, generally the question, what do you, if you've got somebody who's learning something, there's rote learning where they can regurgitate back what's presented, and then there's an understanding, which is deeper. In particular, when people understand stuff, they can forget details and they can reconstruct them. If you don't understand it, you forget the details, you can't reconstruct it, but no people reconstruct it.
Yeah. So there's kind of like the thinking part.
So there's the
Yeah.
thinking.
So guys, I apologize. I don't have plates. It's my bad. I have a little bag that has bags and stuff just in case they forget to bring them. But we do have it's sushi, so we have the sushi cartons. So I'm just gonna do this, and feel free to, if you don't mind, we'll have to be inventive.
Sure.
Put
Thanks
our
for ordering.
engineering
sushi.
hats on. And help yourself. My favorite part of the meeting. There's vegetarian. There's one that's avocado. These are sweet potato. And then this is vegetarian too. And then everything else, just assume it has fish. Well, that's obviously chicken, so that doesn't. Looking great. So, I'll open these up. It is worth noting, one recent announcement Microsoft did make is they finally announced publicly they have the Copilot Studio. So in all fairness, now you can very quickly create your own custom Copilot using, I think it used to be called Power Automate or whatever the tool was, like basically where you did your bots and all that, the stuff they were working on prior to the LLM stuff. And yeah. And so but I don't mean to say that like they just renamed it. They did actually add some pretty cool functionality, and obviously they're building it out as fast as they can. And you can think of it as basically the place where it's everything's studio, so you can customize, extend, create new ones. The difference between that approach and what I'm showing you is that approach, while you're creating custom Copilots, I feel like that's the best option if you're all in on Microsoft, meaning like one of the really powerful things there is a pretty much seamless integration with the graph, which is some of your most important organization data, in the cloud. And then of course the integration with Active Directory, so that between the graph and Active Directory, they can access content and secure it, right? So I want to make sure that that's very powerful, and I would encourage everybody to look at it. It's just for me, and and when I'm talking about this stuff, I'm looking at it more from a developer perspective, the underlying architecture. And actually, I was thinking about this today. You want to know something funny? I am very confident that I am one of the people in probably the world, and I'm not saying the best or anything, but definitely in the higher percentage that understands Copilot. But I have not even used the Microsoft 365. I haven't even turned it on in my tenant yet. But the reason why is because we started, as because you can come to these meetings, literally almost a year ago now, we just went to the GitHub repo. And we were like, wow, this is cool stuff. It's just started building on it. But then we started hearing whispers of, Copilots and stuff. And so clearly what we stumbled on, now we know. Because now if you, like, for example, at the AI tour in New York City last week, or if you were going to a Microsoft event, one of the things that they would tell you is that, if you're doing this down at the code level, you'll do it using semantic kernel and et cetera, which is essentially what we had stumbled on. So we know now that we are in fact literally building on the same framework that they use for not all, but most of their Copilots. I say not all because from what I understand, there's some that they're faking it a little bit behind the scenes as they're building it out. Like they're really doing, they're calling it a Copilot, but really it's like a wrapper around something that already existed, that type of thing. So I won't say all, but it's definitely the framework and patterns that you're supposed to use. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that today. I was like, yeah, it's sort of funny because I haven't even really, used their Copilot or turned it on in our tenant. But because of the coming to the, demoing this for you, working with our team, I end up talking about it in a totally different way, I guess. I thought that was funny. What do you want to talk about next?
So what was this New York meeting about?
It was really great. It was, and by the way, there's more of them. And as a matter of fact, I'm thinking about trying to get one here in Boston, if anybody's interested in working with me on it. But if we go to, they were actually doing this. They started this pre-pandemic. I remember this now because I was living in Puerto Rico at the time, and they came down. They did one in Puerto Rico. They did one in Bogota, Colombia. I'm sure they did a couple around the U.S. as well. But obviously the content's totally different now, right? At the time, they were talking about the cognitive services and their machine learning models, and now literally everything at the event was generative AI. So this was a New York event. The New York event was a developer-focused one. So not all the AI tours are developer-focused. Some of them are a little bit more high level, but I went down to the New York one for two reasons. Actually, the biggest reason I went was the night before. Microsoft Startups they were doing a networking function. And I had very specific questions. We have to do a product video to get to the next tier in the Founders Hub. And I had very specific questions about that video. So that part was cool. Startups did the night before and then this one was a developers event. So when I saw it was focused on developers, I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll go for the second day too, And it was really good. I do have to, I will say, like, anybody that knows me knows I'm very candid. If it sucked, I would tell you it sucked. I would tell you all the ins and outs. And so I would say almost everything was amazing. The only things that struck a sore spot with me was during the keynote, there was one point where the person from NVIDIA, and I think it wasn't the CEO, but it was like one or two, very close. But basically, he took a cheap shot at open source, which I thought was pretty lame to do during the keynote of a developer thing in New York City. He basically said, well, customers have told us that, open source is not quite as, or there's more concerns or something, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I actually called them out on it, and I was, on social, I was like, well, that's pretty screwed up because first of all, OpenAI would not exist without open source, right? Because you wouldn't have any of the PyTorch stuff, none of that. Second of all, Fabric wouldn't exist. Microsoft Fabric wouldn't exist. Well, I won't say it wouldn't exist, but what they're claiming is the best part of it is open source, all the Delta stuff. And furthermore, Azure runs on Linux, from what I understand. That's open source. You know what I mean? So how can you possibly get up on stage and tell us that we should, be more concerned about? So long story short, that was a personal thing. So anyway, called him out on that. And then the rest of the keynote was good. Marcus Sudovic actually flew in to New York City, and so did Satya Nadella. So I actually had to take the train back to Boston. So I missed Satya's the very end. I had just assumed it was just going to be like a video thing, So I'm getting on the train and all my friends start tweeting photos and stuff. They're like, yeah, excited to see Satya and stuff. So anyway, there was that. And then I didn't attend a lot of the actual sessions that they had afterwards. I had some product demos I had to do and stuff, but I heard they went really, really well. And like the main message is, Copilot, and Copilot Studio. And what's really cool is they finally have some really good messaging coming out for developers too. As a matter of fact, I saw some really great messaging today that was, it was doing multiple things. One, making it sound simple, like, going in the other direction. And then two, it just had some outstanding links to resources for developer, different repos and stuff that Microsoft has been working on. So if you Google this, they're all over the world, and they're going to continue to have them. This is the New York. I'm sorry, I was hoping there might be a link to but I won't try to find it now. But if you Google Global AI Tour, they'll be going on for the next year. And there's actually, there's a Twitter account, Azure AI Tour or something like that. And those are the folks that you want to hit up to do a local event, So they actually also launched a meetup. It was like AI and entrepreneurs in New York City. That I think they launched it. I know it was a big deal as part of this event, and they decided that they're going to keep having those monthly meetings. So I was going to see if we could maybe get one of those started here as well, and then see what we can do about getting a tour stop here. I can't promise it's going to be as big as the one in New York or developer focus. But that's for multiple reasons. I think they knew that event was going to be, they must have known it was going to be special. That's why Satya was there. And actually, it made the news. I saw on Twitter the next day, somebody had posted something because the stock actually went up, and they credited what folks had seen at that event, which, by the way, I think is fair. It was packed. Like, you could feel, like, if I was an analyst in that room, if I was an analyst at that event, I would have walked away with, yeah, this is Microsoft's killing it in this space right now.
I just laugh anytime I hear anybody say they know where the market went up or down.
Yeah, oh
For
no,
any-
I know.
for any-
Yeah,
for-
that's
for
so
any
crazy.
reason.
No, and
For
I
any
agree
reason.
100%. But for me, it was just, it made me feel better about making the trip. But I agree with you 100%. 100%.
Yeah, it's totally independent of the quality.
Yeah, yeah,
Quality.
yeah. And in all fairness, I think even Microsoft stock is a great example of that, because their stock has done nothing but gone up the last 3 weeks. But we just found out that they had been hacked for 2 months and their executive emails were being watched. It's not a free market. It's impossible. How do you, you can say what you will, and then remember 2 years ago, they got hacked and the Windows source code landed on the street. The stock's gone up ever since. There's no way. You can't tell me you're a cloud company, your source code gets hacked, literally licked on the street. China could take stuff off your data center anytime, but your stock just keeps going up like that? No, something's wrong with the stock market. Again, this is just Paul Swider speaking. But by the way, I do tell my Microsoft friends this too.
I hadn't heard about the email.
That was just recent. No, just go Google it. I don't want to spend time on it, but basically same type of thing. You know what happened? I think, and again, this is just Paul Swider, not, I think what happened is once they got that Windows source code, then they started using AI and trying to and I think that and that's why, and also again, total speculation. But remember, they're rewriting Windows in Rust. They started last year, right? Right after the source code leak, right? So, total speculation. But I have a hunch that this isn't the end of their security problems,
Well, you can say that about any of these companies.
Well, I don't think you can. Then why has Google not been in the news for the same thing? Why hasn't AWS? Why hasn't Oracle?
Well, the question
as a matter of fact,
have they not been in the news because they haven't been hacked, or they haven't been in the news because the hack hasn't been discovered?
No,
they haven't been in the news because it hasn't been discovered and they've been able to keep it quiet.
I don't. I love Microsoft. I love the company. They've made me millions of dollars throughout my 30-year career. And it's a huge company. It's like a country, right? There's literally 300,000 people, I think, that work for the company. But I don't like everything about it, right? Especially as somebody that's really big on community and philanthropy, I have a big issue with some of the corporate stuff, right? I have a big issue with, I think sometimes they act like a country, right? So I just want to be clear that just because I'm saying these things, I want to be clear, I like most stuff about Microsoft, but I'm also very authentic and I don't mind having the conversation, And so that's, I guess, how I would answer that. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm looking at, again, the stuff you're talking about, and now the concentration seems to be on the prompt engineering side.
For this part of it, yeah.
Well, it seems to be the big thing, because you've got these models.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to, well, how do you get the accuracy up to the point where you're not worried about hallucinations or these
Well, I think that's what this is.
other disasters? Yes, we'll be trying to get that up. So
This is empirical data. This is I want to say peer reviewed because I think this was published somewhere else, but
that's
double check
you're
that.
talking about 90% accuracy.
Yeah.
You're talking about medical or operational stuff involving money or anything like that. 90% accuracy ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah, I totally agree, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, but you've got two different approaches. One is to
And sorry, just real quick, can I add to my thing before you answer? Because actually, I do think it is good enough for some scenarios. I would argue back that it is, because for multiple reasons. One is because I don't have to use it to treat a patient. What if I just want to use it to get an early flag so that I can jump the gun? Here's an example. What if I get a radiology image back and it's triggered as stage 4 cancer?
Mhm.
I'm okay running a model on that to figure out if I should text somebody right away to get those results to the patient so they can immediately make end of life decisions, right? It doesn't have to be 100% for that because I'm not diagnosing them. All I'm trying to do is streamline. And as a matter of fact, usually those, if we were to get really technical, usually those radiology images, it just starts there, right? Once you get a positive, then there's a whole workflow that starts. You need to verify, then it needs to go to the doctor needs to look at it, then it needs to go to the patient. That's an orchestration in a prompt flow AI. That's the new way that I would architect that. And you know what? And along that way, if I'm only at 90% and I accidentally, the doctor looks at it and he's like, no, it's wrong. It's just stage 2, or just stage 1 or whatever. I'm totally okay with that. totally okay with that in that scenario. So I would push back on that and say, no, there are a lot of opportunities in software engineering where 90% is okay. No, certainly not for diagnosing patients, obviously, certainly not for making financial. Here's the worst one. The one that actually, there's some places where I think it's completely unacceptable, should be illegal. I think immoral. And that is what they're already doing, which is using it to deny care based on insurance stuff, right? That's evil, if you ask me, right? Because then 90%, first of all, there's a whole nother conversation about that. But that 90% is leaving people literally dying, right? I mean, literally babies are dying at that 90%, right? So that, that's a different beast, right? In my opinion, excuse the analogy, but yeah, so it's a fascinating conversation. It's fascinating. And then what I would hope is that what we're already seeing is on the clinical stuff is just gonna get better and better and better, right? But for the time being, you are absolutely right. Like one of the biggest things, so now I'm going to go back 1 month when I was at the Node.health event. And so that was the executive event for all healthcare executives. And I would say about 75% healthcare 75% healthcare executives. And I was at the Microsoft office in Times Square. And one of the clear messages there is that it's the phrase, keep the provider in the loop, and evidence-based. The hospitals that are really serious about this and the serious people that are working on this, they believe in evidence-based healthcare. They believe in peer review, right? Don't get me wrong, you do have this undercurrent. What I've noticed now is it seems like there's just as many doctors that work for technology. It's almost like a lawyer degree used to be, like you're getting now like this whole new wave of doctors that they get some sort of MD and then they go work for a tech company or a software company or something, right? So there's that undercurrent as well. I guess you might almost say digital snake oil, right? That you have to be careful of. But the folks that are serious about this, like the folks that I, saw at the Node.health event, they will use terms like evidence-based. They will use the terms like peer-reviewed. And what I was most impressed by, mostly because I think we have a killer product for that, and that is to keep the provider in the loop. And so, getting back to the 90% thing, as long as we're keeping the doctor in the loop and what we're streamlining and what we're doing is streamlining, then we'll be okay. But if use cases like denying care or denying insurance claims, wow, that was already such a nasty part of the system that needs so much work. And so to just think that it's already starting to happen, I already heard it's already there, where they're using this to just systematically deny that stuff is gut wrenching to me.
But they're also using it to approve it as well.
Yeah.
Believe me or not, yeah. Especially like the data-driven radiographic, like AI radiographic interpretation.
Yeah.
That are sent to a lot of insurances. As long as it is an AI-driven report,
Interesting.
they have a higher rate of getting approved. So
Really? That's fascinating.
Probably faster too.
much faster.
Much faster.
Yeah.
That's
But,
fascinating.
Yeah, that is
You know,
something that is, especially in dentistry, is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to the question.
Yeah, sir.
That I was asking. So I see the two pieces of this. The actual large language model that you use, and there's the prompts.
Mhm.
When you're trying to reduce the errors,
Mhm.
you could work. Work could be done on the large language models, and work also done on the prompt engine.
Interestingly enough, though, where you get so far what they're finding, what I'm starting to see whispers of, the best results are coming from making sure the data, looking at the data again, and maybe even going with smaller data sets in some cases. And as a matter of fact, Microsoft just released another paper just this week, I think. It's called Slice something. And actually, I don't even know. Was it Microsoft? But here's the funny part. Remember how I was just talking about making things complicated? So they wrote this whole paper on partitioning your data and how this helps with training and how you do it and everything. But basically what they're talking about is you're just deleting rows of the data set where you think you might have, duplication, different things. So it's like taking the data. Of course, you do that ahead of time, the data wrangling and the data science. But what they're finding is that you can work on the prompts and all that other good stuff. But where some of the biggest return on investment is coming is by revisiting the data set.
When you're talking about the data set, you're talking about like the clinical data set, Or are you talking about the training data for the
The training data set that was
for
used.
the large language model?
Exactly. Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of interest in the smaller language models now, like Pi 2 or Phi 2 and Mistral. It's huge right now. I heard Mistral just placed right behind GPT-4 Turbo. It beat GPT-4. And that's huge. You can run that on-prem. You can run that on a laptop. I think you can run it on a MacBook already. So that's opens up. I was totally supported by Microsoft, by the way. You can load that up in Azure AI Studio. You can. I'm sure there's a way you can run it on Microsoft. 100% they support Llama, and open source. They will tell you that you can put any LLM in there, which I'm sure you can. But like out of the box, like literally, you can just like deploy network and you grab the language files and deploy them up to Azure.
Yeah, so last week I was actually
Yeah.
at the InterSystems Healthcare meetup.
What about that?
I was just down there in the presentation.
Mhm.
One of the guys who works on this type of stuff was looking at impediments
Mm-hmm.
to running these things, and one of the impediments he said was the hardware resources needed to run these models.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that speaks to this, you have something you run on a laptop.
No, of course. Yeah, that's what that took. I would submit that the open source community did far more for OpenAI for AI than anybody else in the last year. And there's a really great paper about this. If you Google secret leak Google paper open source, it just came out. I didn't come out. Apparently it was leaked, but we know how leaking goes, right? Like, I don't know, it's the new type of press release or whatever. But anyway, it's a really interesting article because what they were saying, or the memo or whatever, it said, OpenAI doesn't have a moat and neither do we. And their whole point was that they started the year off thinking, hey, nobody's going to be able to come into this market. It's going to take millions of dollars. They even went to DC. You could tell me they were talking about safe AI. No, I mean, to me, I've seen this before. I think it was part of the regulatory cap. It's just business, right? They want to capture business. So, I mean, that's the reality. That's where we land off. But open source, on the other hand, in the last year, the open source community, down on the laptop now. Oh, Llama, Meta dumped their whole thing and weights, right? Capable of running on a cell phone, even I heard in some cases now. Like there's a whole list of things in this secret memo, and it's basically saying, look, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, we're not going to be able to keep up with open source. So that I love that messaging. That was fairly recent, but now to offset that, let me give you another perspective. So I also, somebody that I really respect a lot, it's not a very well-known person, but I really think of them, in my mind, they're right in the weeds of this. Like every day they're down doing data science, testing these large language models, the different ones and whatnot. And he works with a professor at Wharton Business School. And he said something the other day that I think I'm starting to agree with, and that is we'll have the open source models, of course, and all that stuff, but it does look like these larger language models will be the best of breed, at least for the near term, right? So like if you're really looking for like, okay, we want to do best of breed, then most likely it's going to end up being like an OpenAI and Anthropic, or maybe a Llama, maybe Mistral, even though it's open source, but it's going to be and the notion is you're basically going to get like always, you're going to get what you paid for, more or less, right? So I agree with that. So our approach is what I've decided is that our approach is that we lean towards Microsoft and OpenAI. We love Microsoft, we love OpenAI, and we lean towards Microsoft and OpenAI, but we consider ourselves to be agnostic. Like we, in our Copilot, it doesn't matter to us what LLM you connect it to. For us, it's a setting in the configuration file. And so, and by the way, if that intrigues you, if you haven't heard of Perplexity already, that's actually what they do too. Perplexity is really cool because you can switch between different LLMs just by toggling in the settings. And then it's just a nice UI too. Like it gives you citations, and then it'll give you like, hey, you should probably go look at these next 3 things, if you will. So it's really good for research. Like if you're researching stuff, like Perplexity is cool. Or if you want to just hot swap between LLMs and you're not a developer. If you're a developer, then you'll probably there's a tool called LLM Studio that allows you to load and unload LLMs very quickly and and play with them. Hugging Face has one too as well, the ability to load and run. And Well, they publish a lot of theirs, don't they? A lot.
Yeah,
I could
there's
just
a
spend more
lot.
time on Hugging
And then
Face.
you'll find all of these big LLMs as well on Hugging Face. So
Yeah,
if you're just using their software.
Yeah, we love Hugging Face. This is a true story. One of the here's a great open source thing. Like, well, actually, one of the very first things in our Copilot is we actually use a Hugging Face open source ML model, and the only thing it does is determine if the question is a clinical question or not. Because in our Copilot, we actually want to do the opposite. If it's a clinical question, then we don't want it to go to, to whatever the underlying LLM is that the user has selected, right? If it's a clinical question, don't get me wrong, our next step will be we'll eventually step toes into the clinical space. Maybe, if it's a clinical question, then we forward it to MedPalm or John Snow Labs or Microsoft MedPrompt, whatever the hospital wants to use, right? Like, we're not going to dictate that. So we'll just say we lean towards Microsoft. We like OpenAI, but we're agnostic and we'll support any, LLM.
I have a
Any safe LLM. Let me rephrase that. Yeah.
I have a question with
Yeah.
all of these OpenAI, open source models that we are having. What is the gold standard? Like, let's say in your product you're putting 10 different co-pilots, each trained for their own industries. Like, let's say if it's manufacturing, you have your own, and then every company is doing that. How do you verify that for, let's say, healthcare is a regulated space, you need approvals and all that. How do you get to know whether the background LLM that your hospital is using is actually good?
Yeah,
Or,
it's a great question. That's actually a lot of the stuff that we're working on quite a bit. So how do you? It really, I think the better way to phrase it is like, because of where we are right now, it's like, how do these hospitals get out in front of it, right? Like, how and so what we started doing is we started working with Dartmouth Health System about 9 months ago, having regular weekly meetings to talk about what would it take for Dartmouth to get out in front of generative AI. And so some of the things that we came up with, as a matter of fact, I might even have the PowerPoint slides still open. Bear with me for 1 minute. No, where's PowerPoint? Yeah, I did want to show you this, so I'll leave this open. But essentially, so we learned things like, okay, you need training, duh. Everybody's figuring that out, right? But here's some cool stuff that you wouldn't think of that we learned. You need incident response stuff is really important for AI safety. And so that doesn't mean just like writing a document. It means really preparing for what if something bad happens and putting processes in place for that. And then also testing that. So just like, think of it as almost like a backup and restore thing, right? What's the old saying? Like a backup is only as good as your last tested restore, right? Well, it's the same thing. Like if you're going to put in an incident response center, so this is, again, it's part of our center of excellence, then that thing needs to be continuous and needs to be tested, right? So you can almost think like, white hat, red hat type stuff, right? So that's, I guess, what where my thoughts are on that. So I'll tell you what, now since we're getting close to 7, we could just start to wind it down a little bit. And now that I love the way we did this meeting, because we did like the exact opposite of what most people do. So we cover all the hardcore stuff, and now we can look at a couple slides of like what it looks like in Office and everything. Okay. So yeah, this is great. I love this, getting together like this. So so this is like, I just got this new deck. It's actually up on the Microsoft partner site. So if you're a Microsoft partner, they just added a bunch of new AI assets up there, and this deck is readily available. And I thought this last section was cool. They do have, I guess I'll start at the top just to show you the layout of the deck, but they've got presentation guidance, etc. That's because it's for partners. And then they go through the basics, right? Like, what is a Copilot? And I do like this. They're starting to break it down by roles. That's pretty cool. Like, how would people use it in the organization, right? And by the way, there is a Microsoft. They're starting to talk about a Microsoft Healthcare Copilot. And from my thing so far, I think it's just the Azure Health Bot that's being, slowly probably evolved into a Copilot, just like everything else. But And then they go into HR. So this is just sort of cool, right? It shows you the different areas here. But I actually, this last part is the part that I thought was sort of interesting because it starts to show you how stuff really shows up. So it does go over some basic, how to prompt. But then it's cool because now you can actually see like, okay, real stuff inside PowerPoint. And by the way, this is available now. I just haven't had the time to turn it on. We've just been so flat out busy. I was going to try to turn it on tonight in time for the meeting, but you don't have to just look at the slides. You can go turn this on. So there's 2 flavors. I think there's a $20 flavor, and then there's a pro version that's $30 roughly. And they say you'll get faster response time on the LLM. You're on a different network, I'm assuming. So you get faster response time, especially during heavy traffic hours, and some other stuff, with the pro version. But you can see how it's starting to surface, right? And how they're starting to bake it into the actual app, and with their thing is they like these sidebars and pop-ups and whatnot. And so you can see some of the early stuff with PowerPoint: create a presentation from file, summarize a presentation, etc. And then this is cool too. They've got this Copilot lab. This is really cool. I would check this out. This is it's like prompting stuff, if I remember correctly. So, here it is. I feel like that's the wrong link. I don't think that went to the right place because I clicked on that link before and I remember thinking it was much more impressive than that. So, but I won't go try to find it now. But, you can get these slides, and it's called Copilot Lab. And so this one, you can see where it's starting to show up in Word. And I actually saw a demo somewhere where it looked like to me they just opened up Word and there was like a little prompt screen right in the middle. When you open up Word, there's just a white page. Like there was like a little prompt screen right in the middle of the white page. And they were like, I forget exactly what they typed in the prompt, but boom, and then it opened like a sales presentation or something. It's pretty interesting.
Where like the ungrounded content will not necessarily be factual. Nice little.
Where do you see that?
On the previous slide.
What's it say?
They see draft with Copilot. You see the parentheses on the at the end of the first bullet point.
Oh, add content.
And actually on the second one also.
Add new content in places. Ungrounded. Up to 3 word of powerful files, or providing a topic for ungrounded content. Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense. And to your point, I mean you've been asking this. Maybe I went over the most obvious answer. I went right to MedPrompt because that's where my head is right now. But the reality is that the only way to really make sure you're getting real meaningful stuff back is to ground it. And that's what RAG is. That's exactly the pattern I described. Like if I go off to a SQL server and I get a data set and then I tell the model, you can only answer using this data set, then you've grounded yourself and you're going to be okay. And I would submit there are some cases where you don't want to be grounded. Like what if I'm a writer or something? I might want to say, hey, come up with a really crazy idea for a sci-fi novel, right? So I would submit both are appropriate in the right use case. Business data, factual data, you're always going to want to ground it if you want the truth. And then vice versa.
The trick is just to get to the stuff to the point that the extra work that you have to do to make sure you're not getting hallucinations is less than the work that would be to not use this stuff. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's something to be said for that. Candidly, that's one of the reasons I don't think I use Copilot yet. Is because it's so fast to use ChatGPT. I mean, I love this. It's the same language model, though, but it's almost like a habit now. I just go to ChatGPT and or Perplexity. But my 3 favorite AIs that I always have open in 3 tabs across the screen for writing, I have OpenAI, Perplexity is the second one, and then Grammarly. Because Grammarly is awesome. Because after the first 2 AIs spit it out, then you give it to Grammarly, and Grammarly will find based on the parameters you set there, right? So I use all 3 of those together sometimes, but certainly 2. Like I'll go Copilot to Grammarly. So call it just habit. But for whatever reason, I'm like, okay, if I'm already doing that, like it's gonna be hard to get me to do that, And don't get me wrong, I'm sure they will. Here's a great example. The one in Teams, I'm fascinated by. Like, because I just get lost in all of our Teams data and meetings. Like the idea of being able to say, hey, summarize the last week's of meetings with Tresha, and show me, like, what did you talk about with marketing web people, right? Like, what summarize that meeting, that type of stuff. That I would love. Like that, I will use that. I will pay $30 a month for that when it starts working really good, Like, I know it's going to be a little bit of a road. I'm sure it's not there yet, but boy, you show me that working, and I have to admit, I'll probably pay $30 for that with all the meetings I have nowadays. Of course.
So let me ask you, okay,
Hey, thanks a lot.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
I
don't apologize. I'm so
Thank
happy you
so
made
much.
it.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. This
Come
was great.
again. Yeah, well,
we'll
next
do
month,
that.
do the same thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
we all know the stories about the legal briefs generated by ChatGPT.
Yeah. That was interesting.
So is there any way to generate those briefs without hallucinated cases?
Well, grounding it. Yeah, because technically,
What would
and you have to remember when that first came out, people didn't really know,
What would you ground it against?
Lex law is how I would do it. I would, whatever the most current, or maybe multiple, And so what what that might mean is they still may have a good business model, right? Because if they own the best data, maybe they can put a chatbot on it that says, okay, ground it in this data. I mean, at least this is what I would do if I was in the law industry right now and I was in that space, and then I would sell that, to customers, and because you can ground in your data, you would be okay. Yeah.
As we are on the topic of money, how do you, if it's not a very difficult question for you to answer, how do you plan on making money off of all of this? For any, let's say, your own Copilot that you're designing for. How do you get money, basically?
So we have two. That's a great question. How we make money? We have two products that we're really proud of. That one we've built over the past 10 years with Dartmouth. That's what we are using for the foundation for our physician experience Copilot. But the other one that we're really happy with is this. Is the Wheelhouse AI Center of Excellence. And so that's a 3-tier offering where the low tier is like $24K, the middle tier is $60K, the third tier is $120K. Don't quote me on those prices. That's just my thought, but I think we're underpricing it. But anyway, so we're really excited, and that's focused on folks in healthcare, especially hospitals and hospital systems, et cetera. And so my strategy has been, I take the train down to New York. I went to the Node.health event. I actually, funny thing, we have this prompt guide that we created that sort of went viral at HIMSS last year. It was 250 prompts for healthcare executives. And I now I have a small team that keeps it updated. And long story short, the thing keeps doing really great. I don't know if I have it here, but I really should show you this. Let me just find, here it is right here. So we just did one for this event. There's a rural healthcare leadership conference in Orlando that I'll be at. And what we did is we published this guide. It's called 250 Prompts for Healthcare Executives. And if you look at it, what's fascinating is, so we spend the first couple pages actually explaining to the executives what, how do you prompt? This is free, by the way. We don't sell this. We just believe that if we put this out in front of people, give them ideas, and then we all get happy. So anyway, and then we go into the actual prompts. And what's different about these prompts is we didn't just ask ChatGPT to give us 250 prompts. We actually worked with directors in finance and HR. Like, we talked to folks, and you can tell by looking at our prompts. So we cover, everything from enhancing communication to leadership skills. Notice we even target it, like there's sections that are just for the chief medical officer. There's sections that are just for diversity and equity. Here's financial prompts. And again, these actually, we worked with the finance department in healthcare to come out with, some of these prompts. So what's really fascinating is this has actually turned out to be a really great tool for us. We give it away for free, but you want to see something really cool. So last week at the AI event, we released a new version of this. And the funny thing is, it actually went mini viral, but only inside Microsoft. Like I think, well, again, for the second time, because this happened at HIMSS too, like somebody in a higher up position must have seen it and said, hey, I don't know, still don't know yet if it's good or bad, but I'm not, just to give you a sense, like I'm not joking. So we had only 52, but if you look at the analytics on these, like literally almost everybody here, managing director, strategy and transfer. See what I'm talking about? We have at least 5 or 6 directors in that list of 50. And I would say another 10 that are all in leadership positions, and they're all in healthcare and health. So I don't know what we did, but it's either going to be really, really bad or really, really good. And so anyway, to answer your question, how do we make money? You know, what we're finding is because we're a small team, I have 7 people, but growing, and you know, rather quickly, but we can't compete with $1 billion Nuance and Microsoft, all that. And even these bigger Microsoft partners, they make it hard now. So 1, you have to be the best at what you do. I feel like you have to just be the best at what you do. And 2, you just have to be really creative, you know, and that's what we're doing. And we're working hard. Like, we're not afraid to work hard. We rested during the pandemic, you know, now we're ready to work hard. A lot of our colleagues aren't there yet. And that's great. You know, everybody is in different places in their life. But we're all in, and we're passionate, and I think we're doing the right things, and we're already getting traction. And so that's how we're planning on. And by the way, I didn't even tell you about our Copilot. That's just the governance thing that we're going to market with right now. The main product that we're in the startup hub for, the physician's experience platform, we expect for some organizations that will be a 7-figure investment. So it's not a mousetrap that we're selling. Yeah. So
are you basically you're selling it upfront? The software?
No, we'll have a subscription model. Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we're thinking about maybe even for the time being rolling it into that 3rd tier, you know, or maybe adding a 4th one, and then that would essentially be the way that you would buy it. We're also adding these offers. If you're a Microsoft partner, we're adding these offers to the Microsoft Marketplace. So there's a new AI program up there, and it doesn't even need to be a software product. Like, it can be a consulting offering or something like this. And then they'll have buttons, you know, to book appointment or to see you know, sometimes you'll have a demo, right, that the user can just do. So you go demo or something. So that's in the Azure Marketplace. That's our go-to-market strategy so far.
So then, yeah, I think the key here is how would someone, you know, pay 7 figures for Copilots, and what kind of actual value addition do you have to give towards a product which would make them, you know, pay for it, which is available for free?
Yeah. Well, what's really cool is for us, what's really exciting is that we already had some really cool stuff that we had deployed over the last 10 years with Dartmouth, and we had a great contract that on exit that we would maintain ownership of that and be able to take it to market. And with that platform, we already show a 7-figure return on investment, not necessarily year on year, but they say way more than that the first couple of years, well documented. And then, and now, you know, that's still happening. So what's different about us is that's our starting point. So really with us, I feel like we were it was timing, because we were already looking at taking that to the next level. So for example, it's running on-prem, you know, we were like, okay, so I pitched myself, I was like, okay, we'll put this up in Azure, we'll port it. But then what happened was, you know, as you know, 12, 14 months ago, I started hearing about the LLM stuff because we're working closely with Microsoft. And I could see instantly that it was going to change the way we build software, because I was just looking at it from a software engineering perspective. So for me, I could just see right away that would be how people will integrate with apps, right? So what I'm getting at is we pivoted right now. We said, okay, our upgrade is not going to be just taking our stuff and bringing it to Azure. We're going to put a Copilot on this thing. And going forward, if the UX can be in Copilot, that's where it's going to be. So I'm not saying we still don't need reports and dashboards and other things. We will, of course. But the hope is that most of that functionality we can move to Copilot. And what Copilot allowed us to do is leapfrog our competitors. So what happened was we started doing this 10 years ago. We didn't have any competitors. But then the last couple of years, a couple of the bigger people started creeping up on us, right? And no way we'd be able to compete with them. But then with the Copilot stuff, we are literally able to leapfrog the biggest people in the market. And actually, I'm not suggesting we'll compete with them, but that's a big pie. Like I mean, we're not greedy people, you know. So that's my perspective. And again, you know how software, it's like one of the most competitive industries out there. So many companies fail. So I'm not saying that I'm right or I'm doing anything magic. Honestly, I'm not. I joke with people all the time. I say I have no clue what I'm doing. Like I literally just wake up every morning and I go to the gym to quiet my mind. And then I'm like, let the chips fall where they may. You know what I mean? Yesterday, I literally found myself in 3 meetings at once. One of them was in person. So I literally had somebody in my office I was meeting with and then 2 simultaneous Teams meetings. I finally just had to drop off on. Hopefully the client's not listening. I was like, I mean, they both knew I was there, but but by drop off, I said to one, look, the connection or something, you know, because my brain couldn't focus, you know. So that's the long answer.
Thank you for the elaborate answer.
No, it's cool. I love talking about it because that's our strategy, is to try to be as authentic as we can and to lift people and to help people and to teach people. And, you know, because I know if we do those things, no matter what happens, we're going to be in a good place, you know. So, yeah. So we should probably stop now because anybody that knows me knows I will talk and talk and talk. I want to keep going. All right. If you're on the stream, thanks for being with us.
How many do you have stream?
I don't know. I didn't even check. I'm not sure if it goes out to 10 things though. So I'm not sure if it gives an accurate count. Here it is here.